Do you want to, there is decaf. Yeah, help yourself, and then we'll get coffee, and then we're gonna start.
It's raining.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm not writing notes. This is for the for you guys. I'm doing a side of genius for the hair. It doesn't mean you have to share it. You're very welcome.
Feel free, if you want to pull another chair up. Oh, yeah, I mean, we just, we're trying to have everybody face to face.
Do you want me to bring you a chair? Do you need a chair?
Oh, okay.
I'm alright.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out on such a yucky morning. These are our favorite mornings for Car Rider Line, I'll tell you. Sometimes I tell my husband, I was like, yeah, I have to stand outside, all that, you know, and he's like, oh, like sometimes I think he forgets what we do here. But, so as in everything, you know, we're gonna start with a prayer. And then I'd like for everybody just to introduce themselves twofold. Some of you I know, some of you I recognize your faces, but I'm not necessarily connecting names with faces. And just some of you may not know one another, so I think this is a good opportunity just to also to connect with one another and to, you know, we have lots of new families this year. I think it would be nice, you know, it's another opportunity to make those connections. So in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us together on this rainy morning. Thank you for all of your blessings, especially the blessings of these beautiful children who attend St. Mary of the Lake School. Please help us to open our hearts and minds as we have our first coffee and conversation. Dear Lord, we pray for the people in Ukraine. We pray for world peace. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So thank you again for coming out on such a rainy, dreary morning. But as I said, I'd like to go around and just have everybody introduce themselves, and we'll start with the Joneses here.
Hi, I'm Lisa, and this is my husband Kevin. Our daughter is Doris Jones, and she's in KA with Mrs. Hoffman.
Okay. And they have a brand new baby.
And this is Eloise.
Yeah. What's her name? Eloise? Oh, I love the name. Go back to the people in the back. Mr. Bassett, is that?
Hi, my name is Russ Bassett. My daughter Emily Bassett attends school here in Miss Metzger's class in the 4th grade. My wife is Mary Beth, and we are new parents to school this year.
Hi, I'm Samantha Missal. We're new this year also. I have Angelina Missal in Miss Hoffman's class, and I have Ava in Miss Bickler's class.
I'm Cecilia Kelly. I have Victoria Kelly in 2A and Ryan Kelly in KB, and then 2 little ones at home with grandma.
So enjoy your.
Yes.
I'm Kimmy Lind. My husband might be joining us, but I have Emmy in 2A with Mrs. Milo.
Hi, I'm Michelle Eckhart. My daughter Ainsley Eckhart is in KB in Pearson, and I have a screaming 2-year-old at home for grandma.
Dana Welsh. I have 2 girls in 6th grade and 8th grade. I think is Doris's buddy in 6th grade, Nikki. And twins in 2A.
I'm Jessica Leonetti. My son Kingston Hoffman is in 2B.
I'm Kelly Madden. I have a pre-K 4 in Pinto's class. His name is Sean. I have a 2nd grader in 2A in Mrs. Milo's, and I have a 3rd grader in Mrs. Prisky's class. Her name's Haley.
Mrs. Evola?
I'm Mary Jo Evola. I think I've been here for over 20 years, Riss, when you were here. My son Lorenzo, yes.
Okay.
My son Lorenzo is in 7th grade.
Okay.
I'm Susan Gould. My daughter Fallon is in 7th grade with Mr. Green.
Mr. Green?
Peter Green. I have children in 1B, Sophia, and my son John. He's in 5A, and
here.
Yeah, I actually have my cousin who also comes here wants to be on the speaker. She couldn't make it.
That's fine.
Christine, I'm Chloe Needham. I have Jack Needham and K.A. Hoffman and pre-K 3, Miss Volk. So, and then the baby at home with my husband.
Okay. Okay.
You can let her know we are recording it, and then we're gonna send a link to all the families who
Yeah,
couldn't
I know a couple
come,
people who
so,
actually
yeah.
really want to be here, but.
So we're gonna record it and send the link later today.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Karen Cook. My son Bennett is in KA. He's Mrs. Hoffman as well.
All right, well, thank you for humoring me and doing that and introducing yourselves. So I thought maybe what we would do is some families actually send questions ahead of time. So I was thinking that what I would do is I would start with a question ahead of time, and then we can just go back and forth, and then a question, from anyone here. And that way I'm not just talking to you the whole time, with the questions that were sent to me ahead of time. And also, I really do value this as a coffee and conversation. So please feel free, as we have our conversation, to ask questions. I will tell you that, I am not by any means an expert on COVID. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a school principal. but what I will tell you is if I don't know the answer to a question, if I'm like 85% sure I'll answer the question, I might say, but let me check that. But if I'm totally not sure, I'll tell you that. And I will promise Mrs. Tabler's here. She can write down any questions that we don't necessarily have firm answers to, just because I don't want to give you misinformation. And as you can see, and this is just honestly some of the information I have on COVID, but the guidelines are constantly changing. What I can tell you is we did receive updated guidelines from the Board of Health on February 22nd, so they are fairly current. And we also had some communication with the Board of Health yesterday concerning, just some questions that we had that we thought, would be helpful to have answers to. So one of the first questions was, why has it taken until now to have an open forum for parents and administrators to discuss these issues publicly? So last year, our visitors to the building were extremely limited. We really didn't have parents in the building except for, I think we had one parent per party. As the year unfolded, we started having 8th grade parents in, but we really did not have, public, things happening here at the school, more so towards the end of the school year. Also, I've always made it known to parents that, please reach out to me if you have questions, and I'm happy to answer them. So, which I have done. And certainly, I know that we started having conversation about this, I don't know if it was, I guess at the January school board meeting. I know some parents had asked about coming to school board meetings and had called, I guess, a couple different school board members. The school board meetings here in a Catholic school are so different than school board meetings in a public school. In a public school, the school board are voting members. School board are voting and making decisions anywhere from employing staff to the budget to all kinds of things. Whereas here, they serve in an advisory capacity to Father Dan. So there was conversation about actually having a quote-unquote public school board meeting, but then instead what came about as a result was we really talked about the coffee and conversation. Honestly, I'm happy to do this on an ongoing basis. We did set 2 more up for this year. I'm happy to do it into next year if we find that they're productive and if people come, and because I'm very open to conversation and questions. So, honestly, as I said, the need arose and we started them, and that's why it's taken this long. Does anybody have any? Go ahead.
Would you consider doing after school hours, just so that way people who work can make it?
Certainly. As actually our next one, I think we did say for an evening to alternate, but certainly we can consider and maybe even do a survey for parents. And I don't know that definitely we would always alternate. Okay. But if there was really a demand and a need, and most parents said we'd rather come in the evening, then we certainly would entertain doing that. So. Because we want to accommodate parents. It's tricky because in our virtual world that we have turned into, it's now in some ways, we've all become a little spoiled too, I think, sometimes with our virtual meetings. I don't know if parents may have a request for that at some point. We've had information sessions. I don't know if any of you new families were on one last year, and the virtual information sessions were really popular. So we had, the equivalent of Zoom meeting information sessions. But so certainly, as I said, we want to accommodate working families. Anything else? Does someone in the audience have a question? Go ahead, Mr. Reed.
So, first of all, through this whole thing, I think I'm so grateful to have my children here. I mean, I think you guys have done an amazing job. And, you know, for years, my neighbors would look at me like, why are you spending the money or sending your kids to St. Mary's and driving them? And then COVID hit, and they're kind of like, wow, my kids are home all the time. Your kids are in school learning. So, I mean, I think we've been very fortunate, and I want to thank you for all that. I guess, you know, but the school board meetings, you see on the news, the fighting and the arresting parents. I mean, this is a different dynamic because it's not up to, obviously you can't, I mean, I don't know how much control, I guess maybe that's the question is, like it comes down from the diocese who's obviously listening to the governor, and there's only so much you can do about mask or no mask or in school and all that stuff. I think for me, that would be the biggest question, how much control do you really have over all that stuff?
And that's kind of relevant to like one of the questions that was asked ahead of time. You know, Father Dan, you know, and when this all, you know, when COVID first hit, there was so much unknown and there were so many, you know, things that have changed since then, like just from like, you know, like people thought it was living on surfaces and no, it really doesn't really live on surfaces and things like that. But at this point in time, here at St. Mary of the Lakes, for the most part, we are only doing things that we have to do. So the diocese has pretty much said to the schools, we have to follow the governor's mandates, we have to follow the Board of Health regulations. Some of the recommendations from the Board of Health are recommendations. I've actually have called the Board of Health at times and have said, is this a recommendation or a requirement? Because sometimes in some of these documents, like the wording is not as certain, you know, like maybe it's not saying must, you know, maybe it's saying should. So, you know, things like that. So for the most part here at St. Mary's, Father Dan, especially this year, he made it known to me and, you know, that we are only doing what we have to do. So for example, the Board of Health, and not getting into all the specifics because I'd have to go into the documents and look at the number of days, but like when the quarantine timelines were reduced to 5 days, one of the things that the Board of Health really wanted us to do was to have kids test before they came back. But I called them, I said, do we have to? And they said no. I said, well, we're not gonna do that. So like things like that. So here at St. Mary's, as I said, we're really looking to do the least amount of what we have to do, but we are driven by what the diocese tells us to do, you know. And you know, there was at one point parents who were asking us to take the masks off and to you know, not follow some of the regulations, and it really isn't a choice. There was some confusion, I think, because people thought private schools didn't have to, but the mask mandate specifically said public, private, parochial, you know, all schools. So we would really, schools could have been shut down if we didn't follow it. So my goal really honestly has been to keep the kids in school, you know, which, you know, and I feel like we've been for the most part very successful. You know, we shut down last year twice because of after Christmas vacation and after spring. So like, you know, did that answer your question? Like, so we're following the Board of Health, we're following, you know, any governor mandates, we are following the diocese's mandates, which are pretty much in line with the board, with the governor. The diocese actually tells us we can do more than what we have to, but as I said here, we're not. Some of the Catholic schools right in Burlington County are doing more mandates, you know, than what is necessary. For example, St. Paul's in Burlington. Now, I don't know if they have switched since, but when they switched from a 10-day quarantine to a 5-day quarantine, St. Paul's kept a 10-day quarantine. And I'm not looking to shift, you know, anything, to, you know, or point to St. Paul's. It's just like they have a different dynamic, different, you know, demographics composition, and that's what they, you know, did there. So, as I said, for the most part, we're just doing absolutely what we have to do. Does that answer your question, Mr. Green?
Just to follow up on that, with regard to control, because I'm new to this too, but the amount of money that I guess the Catholic Church is sort of tied to from maybe like the federal government, the money that maybe the church gets, the diocese gets, how much does that really hinder or help control for mandates? It was my belief that if you didn't accept federal money, a lot of these policies may not apply to you, therefore private places could get away with some of these things, like no masks and things like that. Does the federal dollar really hinder us from being in our own control?
We do have some federal dollars and we have some state title money. It's called title money, and the title money is based on the number of students we have in the school every October 15th. So my understanding, you know, not even like, certainly, you know, with the funding, it might have come into question, but my understanding is that we could have been shut down despite funding, just by not following the regulations. I mean, I might not be 100% accurate on that, but that's been my understanding. And I don't know of any school in the area who's not following the regulations, to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other follow-up to?
Yeah, I got it. So even if you didn't take any money, the governor can, I mean, he can do whatever he wants. He can shut them down.
I'm pretty sure the Board of Health could have come in and said, Mrs. Sybil, none of your kids are wearing masks, we're shutting you down. Either correct the problem or, you know, despite funding and whatnot. We don't get a lot of money. I mean, you know, but I will tell you, we get enough money that, yeah, it would hurt us. Like, I want to say it was 35 or 38,000 this year just for security money. So just with the different monies that we get, you know, it would add up.
Because I was going to ask, is there a way to offset that if it really is tied to control? Can we offset that somehow?
Yeah. Anything else with regards to that? Go ahead.
This is kind of in line with the same thing. With regard to the reach of the governor, as we shift, hopefully soon, from a pandemic to an endemic, doesn't the reach of the governor become less involved as we move out of an emergency state to a private institution?
Only if he releases the
He did
emergency.
Thursday emergency.
He did, yeah, and he did like in the
Extended to March 6th,
Yes.
which is why the masks are March 7th.
Yeah, in the document that we received on February 22nd, they say within that document, where did I stick it? They say pretty much like, circumstances in New Jersey have improved to the point where relaxation of universal masking rules in K-12 schools can generally occur. And they pretty much say that the mandate was ending, pretty much what somebody just said, and that, you know, no longer do we have to follow it. It's totally optional. Go
Are
ahead.
the kids from now to the 7th getting more like leeway with taking their masks off, or are they still getting like?
They're having, like, I noticed parents expressed concerns about kids not having mask breaks when the Omicron hit and the numbers were going up. And I did revisit that with all staff and gave them all kinds of suggestions regarding mask breaks. In the sense of, you know, we're still reminding students to have their masks up. You know, just because they still are what we're required to do right now. Because honestly, to me, it's like some of the students, if I allow them, they would go all day with their masks down here. And to me, it's kind of like, it's almost the same thing as let's just take our masks off now. So I know people have lots of different views on it. For me, it's not to be a nudge or a nag as much as just like, we just try to be consistent across all.
What is the difference from today to 2 weeks from now?
He gave himself another 30 days. That's like.
You mean like why was that date
Yeah,
arbitrarily
like,
picked?
Why be so on top of it if you know, the science doesn't necessarily follow, hey, today, you know, you can contract COVID and something bad's gonna happen to you versus 2 or 3 weeks from now, you're totally fine. I just feel like it sends a confusing message to the children. And like, even when I go to a store and I see a sign, they're like, Mom, you gotta wear a mask, and I'm like, no, you don't. You know what I mean? Like, just be fine. Like, everything's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
So it's confusing that most of our children, I feel like now, in a couple of weeks, you're probably not gonna have to wear a mask anymore.
Yeah, and I have said to the students, like the older students, I've said, come March 7th, that we don't have to wear them anymore. I'm a rule follower, I mean, that's, when you get to the bottom line, I'm a rule follower. I have tried to bend the rules a little bit when I can to try to be a little flexible. For example, there was a kid who was going to miss performing back in November, we did All Together Now, and they would miss performing because they had 1 day of quarantine left, and I said, I'm going to be flexible. I had the child get tested. So I've been trying, I try to be as flexible as I can, but when it comes down to it is March 7th is the day where the masks can come off in the schools, and as I said, I'm a rule follower. So, You know, I'm not trying to be, you know, a pain in any way, or, you know, but as I said, like, I want to send the message to the kids that, you know.
And I understand, 'cause
yeah.
I understand your position, like, you know, you want them to follow the rules as well when it comes to other things, maybe not just, you know, something that we disagree on, right?
Mhm.
But, you know, it does concern me because, you know, obviously there's a lot of big things going on politically in our world, and people are on opposite sides.
Mhm.
So, you know, when, for a situation like this, like, I would pull the masks off September, you know, and obviously, I want my children to go to school, I want them to have a good experience, I want them, you know, be happy, healthy, socialize. But then, you know, you do have to follow, like, you know, you guys are in charge of an entire group of people. You know, what, 200 kids, or?
We have 336 students right
This
now.
year.
Oh, wow.
So it does concern me, like, why we're not sitting down and we're not all having these conversations, because, you know, maybe we learn something new from one another, maybe, you know, it changes how our perspective on something, and obviously, clearly, there's no data to prove that from today to the 7th is gonna do anything different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like-
and I clearly, like, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I agree. There is no, the only data that I would even attempt to refer to is, I will tell you that, like, we get weekly reports on, you know, they call it Cali scores, and last week was the first week where all of New Jersey was in the moderate range. It was, I think last week was the first week off the top of my head that our region was in the moderate range. So, or it might have been 2 weeks ago. But bottom line is, like, when that lifting of the mask mandate came out, the numbers were still, we were still in the high range for sure. Might have still been in the very high range. So, like, I think, and I don't know, because as I said, I am by no means a scientist or a medical doctor, but I think the thought was that, you know, that the numbers were going to continue to go down, and that March 7th was the time when, you know, that they could lift it. I also, and I'm not, you know, when it comes to all the laws and whatnot, you know, it's not my area of expertise, but what I can tell you is that, I think the mandate also expired at a certain time. I want to say it was something about 45 days or something from another. So I think that was part of the factor with that date as well. So no, like, I wouldn't even attempt to try to, like, to talk my way into, like, well, why is March 7th? Because I agree, like, why March 7th and not March 5th? Why, you know, so I hear what you're saying. And yes, like, you know, it's when you have this many students, it's like, you know, I mean, there's rules for a reason, and sometimes we don't agree on the rules, you know, but you know, we do, you know, when you have a school, we have to have those rules, and I do like to send students a consistent message. So, you know, as I said, come March 7th, you know, the mask will be totally optional. You know, next week we will be talking with the students. I'm going to ask the teachers to talk to the students about things like, you know, some students will be wearing their masks to school next week. So we want to, you know, we want those students to feel comfortable, you know, so we're going to make, you know, I'm going to put that out there to the kids next week.
No, I absolutely agree
Yep,
with that. 'Cause
yep.
don't
Can I
want,
say something?
obviously-
Mm-hmm.
I think that it gives, and I am fully 100% agreeing with you on why not just now, why 2 months from now. I think it gives the people who are concerned, who do want the masks, who maybe were considering vaccinating their children and now they want to, it gives them that timeline to do it before it's just happening.
Right.
Like, it gives
Yeah,
the
I mean,
leeway of making decisions for
I
people
get
who
what you're
may.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
With regard to the conversation that's going to be had with the students, I would politely ask that it's the other way too. You know, for students that are comfortable wearing masks, I don't want my child who will be maskless to be made to feel that he's not in the right.
Of course.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, what actually happens on the 7th? So, like, I'm not sending him a mask, there's no masks in the backpack, like, we're good with no masks at all, anywhere?
Yeah,
Like,
well,
everywhere? So, like,
We'll pull the
there's-
dumpster
like,
out in
there's
Carlisle.
the-
You can just-
Actually, really.
So in answer to your question, we, you know, and I did send home the memo from, Dr. Schmidt, the diocese superintendent, you know, that, kind of outlined some of the things regarding the masks and, like, you know, kind of exceptions to it. speaking off the top of my head, we did, I did review the February 22nd document last night. Oh, actually, Kimberly here, because I told Mrs. Taylor I'd give her a copy in case, so she could also look through if there were specific questions I didn't have right at my fingertips. But they do talk about if for some reason, like the numbers jumped and we were back into the very high range, I believe in this document, it actually, and if you give me a minute, because I think I underlined it. But they talk about if it's in the very high range, during, then they're recommending, or I think that actually said that they should require
So-
universal masking.
Yeah, so here's my question.
Yeah.
If
it's in
it
the-
says should, right, so it says should consider.
Yeah.
And then the one, if it's very high, says should require.
Yeah.
So is that,
Well, that's that word should again, right?
Right.
So that's a question for me to the Board of Health, because and as I said, if I'm not certain, because that word should can be really tricky. But they definitely, if it's in the high or the orange range, they said should strongly consider,
Right.
but they're not saying you have to. And then the very high, as Kimberly said, should require all universal masking. They also talk about if there are specific things, and hang on a second, here's the other one that I want to have in front of me. If there is in a specific classroom an outbreak, and we have multiple students in the classroom, that classroom may have to mask for a period of time. One of the big things, and I know parents are going to have different mixed feelings about this, is that when they reduced the quarantine to 5 days, they said that when students return, for days 6 through 10, they have to wear a mask. And that continues to be a requirement. So when children return, if they've had to quarantine because they were exposed, or if they were if they were homesick with COVID, they're home for 5 days. As long as they're symptom-free and they're good to come back to school, then they actually say they have to wear a mask for
Even if
5
they're
days.
Am I quarantined? Is that the purpose of quarantining?
They can't test out.
Unless they're.
Well, what they're saying, and did you say Mrs. Needham? I'm just trying to remember. Cook and Needham.
Yeah.
What they're saying is that if the reason why they reduced the quarantine to 5 instead of 10 is because they feel that the COVID is most contagious on days 1 through 5. But it's still, there have been cases where it's been, a child has tested positive after being negative on day 7, 8, or 9. So that's why they're saying just to have that layer of protection. They want to get kids back to school. They changed the quarantine because they recognize that this is totally, kids are not in school for extended periods of time, but yet they also wanted to prevent.
Does that rule apply for unvaccinated?
Vaccinated and boosted, the mask rule does apply. If you are vaccinated, you do not have to quarantine, and I have to go back in and check.
But you still have to wear masks when you come back?
If you are vaccinated and boosted, and let me just check just so I make sure, because I just read this again last night.
I'm not, I
Yeah.
don't think anyone should, so.
I think if it's for one, it should be for all, 'cause,
And see, that's where it gets really
I know,
tricky.
I do agree with that, but
Follow
then at
the
the same time,
science.
this is why I'm not vaccinated, because you can't make it make sense to me at all.
Yeah.
I mean, not that I want there to be a division where, I don't want that either.
It doesn't.
That a should or a must?
I think regardless,
Very vague.
in school, regardless of vaccination status, everything should be the same.
Yeah, I do agree with that.
If you're, if you have to quarantine everyone, regardless of being vaccinated, unvaccinated, you should all have the same amount of time, because we know that this virus transmits even if you are vaccinated. So, I think even if the kids have to wear a mask after being quarantined, even if you're vaccinated, you should also have to wear that mask. Because I don't want,
Yeah,
God forbid my
I
child has to
agree.
be quarantined and come back and he has a mask on, everyone will be like, haha, you're not vaccinated. Or it'll basically point them out. Be like, oh, you were gone for a few weeks. Oh, you must be vaccinated because you're not wearing a mask.
Here's the thing, and I have heard from parents, who've told me that I'm discriminating against unvaccinated students, and I am by no means discriminating. I am not making the rules, and that's what it comes down to. I certainly understand, parents' concerns regarding vaccinated versus unvaccinated, and what kind of a message are we sending. I mean, but I don't make the rules, and what I'll tell you, and I don't know what our mix in here in the sense of parents who may have their child vaccinated, who may not, but what I do know is that we would have parents of students who are fully vaccinated and boosted, that if I said their child had to quarantine at home for 5 days because unvaccinated students do, but the Board of Health doesn't say they have to, like, if you put yourself in those parents' positions,
Yeah, and
that
also for us though, I mean, vaccinated people in general, whether you're a child, an adult, can still get it and spread it, so it's confusing all the way around. And I mean, me as an unvaccinated person and my children are not vaccinated, and probably just as frustrated as those people. So there's nobody in the wrong here, but it's like, when does common sense come into the picture? Like, when do we say, and it's not, I'm not saying it to you, I have no idea, I have no idea what position you play or and if I come across, I'm frustrated.
you don't come across,
Well, one, I'm not a public speaker, so I'm so nervous. I'm also.
but you're doing a great job.
I know you guys couldn't tell because I just keep talking. But I'm shy. I swear. I'm just sad for my children. I just cannot even wrap my head around. I mean, the world in general right now, obviously, we all know what's going on, but I can't wrap my head around how we've gotten here. And I'm sad for them. I'm sad to, I don't know how to explain things to them because it's not the world I grew up in. And most of us didn't.
Right.
So,
Right.
I want to make as much sense, like, I'm telling my kids, you don't be afraid to get people sick. Like, if you're sick, you stay home, you get yourself better, and then you leave when you're ready. You know what I mean? But I had to explain that to my 5-year-old. He's like, I have to wear the mask because I'm gonna get somebody sick. And yeah, maybe at the time when we didn't know a whole lot about it, I mean, I was pregnant during it. So when they said to me, I was watching the news just like the Zika virus or whatever, when babies were born and they had all the defects from it, I was concerned. And when children were not in the category to really worry, and I'm not saying all children, I'm sure there was things that had happened, and I think perspective is everything if you know somebody, and I think we had that conversation over the phone too. Everybody has their own little story, everyone knows their person that somebody was affected by either vaccine or COVID or whatever, and we're all just trying to like figure it out, right? But at what point do we stand up and us parents make the decision for our own children? And it's really, it's frustrating.
Yeah. Certainly, I will take the feedback that you guys, that you ladies and gentlemen are giving me regarding the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated to Father Dan, and Kimberly, please make sure you're making a note of these things. My guess is Father Dan is going to say no. We're following the regulations. I mean, I would love to tell you your unvaccinated students don't have to, but like it's required right now that they do. And I certainly understand your frustration. I really have tried to